Hello and welcome to Storical. I am your host, Peter Roberts. At Storical, we think your stories are historical. History is the story of you, and they deserve to be recorded and shared. Storical is the place you come to for advice on how to capture life story, tools to use, and how to complete your project. Listen to experts, memoir writers, and product reviews. Visit us at lifestoryprofessionals.com to read information that we talk about on Storical, and to get free downloadable tips, and to follow links and books that people on our show have written. Let's inspire you to start. Welcome to episode 23 of Storical. Today I speak with writing coach Patricia Charpentier, who has experience in helping people write their memoirs. She talks about goal setting and timelines and historical timelines as a way to get people to look at the span of their entire life and to choose writing about a portion of it. Starting small is a good way to go. She also talks about keeping people motivated and setting goals. She describes the middle of the writing experience as like walking through mud. She also talks about the anxiety in finishing and how to keep your eye on the goal. With humour, Patricia shares anecdotes about how she helps her writing clients reach that goal of printing a book, despite 95% of them describing themselves as not being a writer. After people have published their book, they share it with family, and Patricia talks about how that is a special experience, how it's a special experience for a writer's family to get to know them in a way that's different to how they know them now. Patricia also gives us some terrific advice on how to get started and to maintain your writing. And as usual, the show notes will give you directions to her website. So let's welcome Patricia. Thank you, Patricia Charpentier, for being on Storical today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Now, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
It was close. It's a really difficult one. It's a South Louisiana Cajun French name. So if you're going to do it technically correct, it's Charpentier. But I answer to most anything. Anybody that gets in the vicinity is fine.
Well, tell me, Patricia, how did you become interested in life story?
I have always been interested in life stories. I started working as a paid writer for a small weekly newspaper in South Louisiana when I was 14 years old. And from that time on, I knew that was what I wanted to do. And believe me, I took a lot of detours and stops and fits and starts and all of that. But I always wanted to be a writer. I thought initially I wanted to work in the newspaper industry, which I did for a while, but I never was interested in the hard news. I could care less what the city commissioner was doing or anything like that. I always liked writing feature stories, and that was my job. I would do the full page feature stories or half page feature stories where I could go in depth on someone's story about what they did and then supplement them with photographs. It goes way back from when I was 14.
So, Patricia, what do you do with your business today?
Well, I do a little bit of everything with my business. I'm one of these people that like so many different things. I haven't been able to settle down just on with one yet, but I basically help people take the desire that they have in their hearts to tell a story and put it into book form. And I do everything that involves. So I will speak to people. I speak at genealogy groups, writers groups, pretty much anywhere. Anybody will give me a soapbox, I'm on it, to encourage them to write their stories, or at least have their stories written, but encourage them to capture their stories in some kind of way. I teach people, I do a lot of classes, both like video classes so people can do them remotely, or local classes in the Orlando area where I live. And so I'll teach them there. And then I find that people need a lot of help with it. So with writing is kind of a daunting task. We've still all got this ninth grade English teacher with the red pen on our shoulders. So it's kind of a daunting thing. So I'll coach people through the process of writing it step by step. I edit for them. And then I also publish. I have a small publishing company where I can kind of be a one stop shop for people. They can come with a desire and end up with a book.
So, who are your clients? What do they need?
My clients are a lot of different people. Originally, it was mostly people that were older. It's people that have gotten to a point in their lives where they know they're not going to live forever. And they know that they have something that they want to pass on. So I've seen it with much younger people who have kind of come up with, they've had some life changing moment, either an accident or an illness, where they know that sense of like, okay, I don't have all the time in the world that I thought I had. Most of the time, it tends to be older people that are, I'd say, 65 and up, which I don't consider 65 old at all because I'm like, going to be 62 this year, so it's getting younger all the time. But people that are older, or and then I'm finding a lot of younger people too, like the kind of millennials and a little bit beyond that, our age group. They're starting to see like, oh, I want to write about my travels. So I want to write this or that. The clients are getting younger at times too. And it's also a process that's not really cheap. You can do much more expensive things in your life, but it's a labor intensive process. So it usually needs to be somebody that has the financing to be able to do a project like this. So
I asked Patricia how young was her youngest client.
my youngest client was 8. he,
That's young.
he was so cute. He was so cute. Yeah, he wanted to write his life story. So, he didn't have a whole lot of time to cover, but he had a lot of things that he wanted to say. And, he said them.
And do the needs of your younger clients differ from those of your older clients?
No, I don't think the needs are that different. Most of the people that I work with want more a segment of their lives, a true memoir, a slice of their lives. Maybe not the I was born a very young child all the way to today. Like I just finished one for a gentleman who was a retired Navy captain, and he really wanted to talk about his deployments. So we worked together and he wrote a book called Seven Ships, and it's about his time on those 7 ships. So it really doesn't include anything other than that particular topic. I've got a young client in her early 30s that wants to write just about her travels. So some people are very specific in what they want to write about and covering like one aspect of their lives or one time period, and others are really wanting just kind of an overview of the entirety of their lives.
Writing your own memoir is a very difficult task. So many of us have had the idea to write a book, but we don't start. I asked Patricia about her experience on why people don't get started writing their memoir.
Well, writing is one of the most difficult things to do in the world, I think, because if everybody wrote a book who said they wanted to write a book, we would have so many more than we have. I can't introduce myself to anyone and say that, oh, this is what I do for a living. I help people write their personal and family histories without somebody saying, I really have wanted to write a book. When I ask them, well, how far have you gotten? And they're like, oh, I hadn't started yet. It's just an idea. Unfortunately, I think many people have the desire, but they're waiting. They wait until they retire. They wait until the kids are out of the house. They wait until the perfect time to be able to do this, and there is no such animal.
Okay, so you've admitted that you can't write your memoir on your own. So you hire Patricia as a coach. She has a goal based system to help people keep on track and to keep them accountable. Let's hear about it.
What I do is I help them write a segment, either a short story, a chapter, and they give that to me, and I will edit it for them. We go back and forth. We talk about it. We'll set some goals. I meet with them once a month through video conferencing, and we get to where we can see each other. And I have clients all over the country. I have clients I've never met face to face, and we set goals for that particular month, which he wants to accomplish or he wants to accomplish. And then we get together that next month, see how we did on those goals, make any adjustments we need to, set goals for the next month, and then talk about the work, what they have done in that time, and go over the edits that I've made.
Even with a coach, there are barriers to finishing a memoir. Time is usually not your friend, and it seems like too many things can get in the way of writing the memoir. Let's hear how Patricia works with her clients to coach them in writing their memoir.
Yeah, it's definitely a collaboration, both of us together helping them, because this is it's just a hard thing to do, to start a project like this and really to sustain a project. It's very difficult because life interferes, and I've been doing this for 20 years and finally got around to working on my own memoir, and I have all kinds of trouble, trying to carve out that time that I need. So it's not easy to do, and every time, really throughout my life, I find when I'm facing something that's not easy to do, I need help to do it, and a coach is who I go looking for.
You mentioned that one of the barriers for people is time. They don't have time in their life.
hmm
What other kind of barriers do they face, and how do you help them get over that?
Let me say one about time, just a little story, because that's always the thing. I don't have time. I don't have time. And I had this one woman. Her name was Eunice. She was in a class of mine, and it was just a short class, like a 3-hour class or something. And then she went on, and I went on. And I got a call from her a while after that. I don't even remember how long it was, but she told me, she says, "Hey, I did what you said." And I was kind of like, okay, what did I say? Because I say a lot of things. And so that always makes me nervous when somebody tells me they did exactly what I said. And she says, "I wrote for 10 minutes a day and I want to invite you to my book launch."
Oh, wow.
What she had done is, I had told them, and it's something that I tell a lot of people, is write for 10 minutes, because we get this thinking going that we have to have blocks of 2 hours, 3 hours, right while you're sitting in a doctor's office, right while you're stuck in traffic. I mean, just look for opportunities right while you're taking your lunch break. Just look for opportunities to write, even if it's 5, 10 minutes, because it is amazing what can be accomplished. And if you do that consistently.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mhm.
I know that when I'm sitting at the doctor's office, for example, I've always got things running through my head, but I've always got my phone with me. So if I use notes
Yeah.
and I write a lot of stuff on notes, and then I can just email that to myself. So next time at the computer, I can grab that bit of text
Yeah.
and then put it in the document I might be editing.
Yes, definitely. Because, that's how ideas are. I mean, they come at the most inopportune times. They're good ones. And we think, oh, this is great. I'm going to write this down when I get home. And it's gone. It's long gone by the time I get home.
As soon as you walk through that door, it's gone. That's right.
Yeah, totally gone.
So what other barriers do people face that you help them with?
Well, one, I think the biggest one is that people will think I don't have the skills. I'm not a writer. My spelling is bad. I don't know grammar. All of those. And like I say, the ninth grade English teacher on our shoulders with the red pen telling us, that we've got comma splices and whatever. And, my motto for my business and for all the work that I do is, the only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all.
Mm.
So that's a big barrier, and that's where I start with people, to let them know that their story is important. It's very important. You don't have to have climbed Mount Everest or done anything. Just what they would consider an ordinary life is really not. It's pretty amazing because they're the only person that has lived that life in that way. And if they choose not to tell their stories, then we have missed that experience of life. One of the big barriers, people are afraid that they're not going to do it right. That's why I've got that motto, and that's what I really impress upon people is that you cannot do this wrong. If you do it, you can't do it wrong. I mean, grammar can be fixed, spelling can be fixed. I mean, I had one client whose spelling was so bad. I mean, I would have to call the guy up and ask him what the word was because I couldn't even figure it out from his spelling. But he wrote a delightful book, just a delightful book. I would say 95 to 98% of the people I work with would not call themselves a writer when they started this project, but they have a book that they hold in their hands at the end of it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice to be able to just get started and to think about it a little bit at a time. I like the idea of your goal setting as well. How does that work out?
The goals, I just spend some time with clients at first to find out exactly what it is that they want to do. And most of the time it's like, oh, I want to write my story. But I try to dive a little bit deeper into it to see what's the message that they want to convey. Who are they writing to? What is most important for them to know? So, with that kind of information, then we start putting together goals. And some of the early goals that we have is to do simple things. One is like a timeline, go as far back as you can remember and bring it up to date. That's not a quote unquote writing task. So I try to start with tasks that are not as demanding or as scary. And I like lists a lot. I just think a list is the best way to start writing because we make lists all the time. It's we make grocery lists, to do lists, and so it's not intimidating. So I'll have them usually start with a list, and then we continue to use that list making through the process. You know, the goals come from them. I don't really impress or put goals onto people. I may make some suggestions, but most of the time they're telling me what it is that they would like to accomplish. And then we focus on how to go about doing that.
So why do you use the timeline approach? Is that so that people can figure out, oh yes, this clarifies for me which area of my life I want to write about?
Partly, yeah. They may see that, oh yeah, this was a really interesting time in my life. But I think it's good to start with a bird's eye view of whatever you're wanting to do. And that timeline is the bird's eye view. It's the high level, you're kind of looking at your life in its entirety in a page right in front of you. And most of us don't do that. We look at little pieces. So there's amazing things that can be learned, like some dots connected when you put your whole life onto one sheet of paper. I also have clients use historical timelines, not strictly personal timelines, but historical timelines where we put their life events up against what was going on in the world, in the United States, major events or things that were happening in the world because that gives another whole dimension to their lives. And I've seen that over and over again where people have put two and two together about something when they saw their lives up against what was going on in the world. That's, just side by side like that. You see things that you would never see otherwise. You would never make the connections in your mind.
That's interesting. I think we always say, where were you when JFK was assassinated?
Exactly. Yeah, when the Challenger exploded and, 9/11. So those historical moments are important, and that's one thing I always get clients to write about are those major historical events because we can read what happened, in JFK's assassination. We can read the details of what happened, but what that does is when people write about it, we get a personal impression of it. And I've learned so much about World War II because of the number of clients who were veterans of World War II. And it's just been amazing to me. I've learned so much more than I ever learned in a classroom about it because they've made it personal. And I've seen the journals that they kept while they were in active duty and on World War II. And they shine a light on a portion of the war and a time that the history books don't capture. And that's why it's so important that people write their lives and write their experiences because I want to see historical events through the eyes of people who lived through them and were impacted in all kinds of different ways.
So let's talk about the rest of the process that you go with your clients through them writing their book and you coaching them along. How much time do projects take?
It varies. It depends on how much time they have, how much they want to invest. I tell people that they could probably finish the writing portion of it, and I have done this with a lot of my clients, in a year's time of consistent effort, not dedicated effort where that's the only thing they're doing in the world, but consistent effort where, they are working on it all the time, some doing something on regular periods, putting certain amounts of time in it every week, every month, and not taking just really long breaks with it. So it can be done in a year's time, but it depends on how much time people have, and it depends too on their motivation. One of my clients I remember well, he contacted me. He was a genealogist. He told me, he said, I picked up your card 3 years ago thinking that, okay, one of these days I might need your help. And he said, I need your help. He said, I've just been diagnosed with cancer and I've got about 6 months to live.
Oh, wow.
I want to finish my genealogy. There's some things that I want to do in genealogy, so I don't have time to do all the writing. Will you help me? It can be done in whatever amount of time. And then I've had other projects that have taken years to complete, which I don't recommend because the longer you drag it out, the easier it is to give up on it.
Well, let's take it from there. How do you encourage people to complete their project, to finish writing that book?
Yeah, well, next to getting started, I think finishing is the hardest part of it. I see it over and over again where people will kind of get into the middle of it, and I'm in the middle of writing my own memoir now. I don't know, probably 60 something thousand words into it, and it's just that like walking through mud part of a process of just being in the middle and it's like, is this ever going to end? And oh, this sounds terrible. There's nothing good about this. Why am I wasting my time? And everything looks better. Cleaning out the refrigerator or dust bunnies under the bed starts to look better than actually sitting down to write. I try to really keep people on task during that middle part because I know that's a really dangerous time. If I can get them through the middle, then they can kind of start to see that there is an end in sight. I try to let people see the end, to keep the end in mind. I had one client where she would keep a photograph of her great grandchildren because that's who she was writing to. So she would keep a photograph near her writing desk all the time because she was reminded that was her motivation. So we try to find ways like that to continue to motivate people to keep going. And ending, I find finishing too, people have a difficult time. I've got a couple of clients. One client that's in the anxiety of finishing right now, and I felt it when I wrote my book too.
So there's a stage called anxiety of finishing?
Yes, I that's my diagnosis, but there is an anxiety in finishing because, you've worked on this for a while. I mean, you have invested so much time and energy and emotion and everything in it, and you can see you're getting to the end. There's a nervousness that comes with that. So my clients start wanting to rewrite everything, or they start finding problems with everything that was perfectly fine before. And I mean, it's just amazing to me how the different things that we come up with. And I was going to tweak my book to death. I mean, my book, my Eating an Elephant book, I was gonna tweak it to death, and because I had a fear of finishing and letting it go and it going out into the world. There's just an anxiety that went with that, that I finally had to set a launch party. I set a date for a launch party and sent out 100 or I don't know how many invitations, 100 or more, had a date and everything, and so I had to let go of the book and actually finish it and send it on to the printer. So I know, I can recognize it when people are in that anxiety stage of not quite sure they're ready to let it go yet.
Right, right. Yeah, I remember I had to finish a directory for my school, and it was done, and I couldn't bear to let it go. I thought, well, what if there's a mistake in there?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't objectively see the end. So I really think that's where you as a coach would be very handy, because you keep people on track. You remind them of the objective. You remind them about what their timeline is.
Right. And, I'm can be a little cattle prod, a nudge to keep them moving along. And again, I'll try to bring them back to the goal, what they want. Writing the book, that might be the initial goal, but that's not really the goal. The real goal underneath is usually that they want their families to know them in a way that's different from how they know them now. They want future generations to know that they existed and that they left a mark on this world. And so I try to bring them back to that motivation, to helping them to experience what it's going to be like giving their books to their family members and how they might want to do that and what do they think the response is going to be. And it's when I first started this, like 20 years ago or so now, I thought that people were writing in order to leave something behind for generations that they would never meet. And that's partly true, but what I've learned since then that happens, it's great to leave something for the future, but what happens are conversations now that would never have been had otherwise, because that the book, it just reveals so much, and family members ask questions, and I just don't want them to miss the opportunity of that experience of sharing it with their family by having the anxiety of finishing and giving into it.
We could probably talk about the publishing part here, but I want to ask you, what do people do with their finished books once they're finished? How do they present them to families, and what's the reaction from their families?
Oh my gosh, it's so great because I've had the privilege of being at a lot of times when they're sharing their books, and I just think, wow, this is just the coolest thing in the world. Some people have parties and they hand out their books and they sit there and sign them for people. And one little client, I just went to her 100th birthday party. We did her book launch, and she was about 98.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we were writing we were writing about her husband who was 104 when we started. So and then he didn't live to see the end of the book, so he would always tell me, "Hurry, hurry." And I'm like, "Look, you might have ought to started wanting to think about doing this before you were 103 and a half, you know?" So I will hurry, but and some people do it one on one. they make kind of a thing of giving their book just individually. But it's just always a really special moment. I remember the first book that I did, it was for a Christmas present for my best friend, and I interviewed her mom without her knowing about it and wrote a book. And when I handed her the Christmas present and she opened it and she saw a picture of her mother as a young woman, I could just see in her brain, like, what is this? This is a picture of my mother and all. And she wasn't getting it. And then she picked it up and realized what it was and burst into tears. And I burst into tears.
So, how do families take the book? Do they read the book? Who reads the book?
I've only had one client whose family, some of our family members refuse to read the book. All the rest of them love it. And I mean, they just absorb it. And I have one client whose grandchildren did book reports in school on his book. One of them did a video presentation about her grandfather based on the book that he wrote. They receive it in all different kinds of ways, but it's always pretty special. And people tend to think, "Oh, they're not gonna be interested in that," or "They already know everything there is to know about me," and none of that's the truth because we get to know people in a different way. The things that I've gotten from my mother help me to see my mother as a person and not just as my mother, to see her as a woman. There's that connection that's made too, where they start to learn so many things that they really didn't know about this person that's important to them.
It's actually true for children, I think, because really know the first 20, 30, 35 years of their parents' life.
Yeah, yeah, they don't have any idea what went on in that time period, or it may have just be the few stories that they tell. This weekend, I had a gentleman that flew down from Michigan, and I interviewed him for 4 days, and I'm ghostwriting his book. And his family may know the general story about something that happened because he tends to be a storyteller. But what I asked him for were a lot more details. I asked him for enough to where that I could paint a scene of what that was really like. And instead of the person or the child just knowing, okay, this happened, I tried to give them an experience of what that was like when that happened. They get more than just the what that happened. I think they learn more about the why behind things that happened and just some more details about the how.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your book. You mentioned before that you wrote a book. In fact, you've written more than one book. The first one was Eating an Elephant, Write Your Life One Bite at a Time. Can you tell me who that book is for and why you wrote it?
That book is a compilation of all my teaching up to that point. I had been teaching for about 10 years before I wrote the book. And that book is for people that think they absolutely cannot do this, that there's no possible way. And the reason why I named it what I did, but eating an elephant, write your life one bite at a time, and even it's a cliche, is because that's what we think. We look at this huge life that we've lived and think, oh my God, this is impossible. How would I ever do this? So the book helps people to break their lives down into more manageable pieces and kind of gives them a process about how to go through the writing of a book. And it's written in a very lighthearted, don't take yourself so seriously kind of way. So it's kind of funny. A lot of it, you learn a lot about South Louisiana because I use my heritage as examples throughout the book for people. I had to ended up putting a glossary in it because people didn't know what I was talking about when my early readers. But it's written in little bites. There are like 200 little bites in the book about that help people go through the process of writing, and it's not daunting. You can pick it up and you can look in the index and find what you want to read about and read a couple of paragraphs about it. It's a book that I know people use as references because they tell me they keep it there and when they're stuck on doing something in particular, like describing a person, then they pull it down and they look at just at that section. Most of the people that I've heard from with the book just felt like it was possible. They thought, okay, this is something I can do. And that was my greatest hope, was that people would feel inspired and know that it was possible.
Now, your book's available on Amazon,
It is. It's available on my website and on Amazon as well.
and you've got two other guidebooks to help people write. One is Bringing Your Ancestors to Life,
Right.
and the second one is Focus on Writing. I remember.
Yeah, those 2 are smaller book. The Bringing Your Ancestors to Life is how to do that, how to make it so that all the names and dates and places that genealogists have can turn into more than just names and dates and places, to make those people real. So it kinda addresses some of the things that they can do to help them bring the people to life. And, the focus on writing, this is supposed to be a whole series. I just hadn't gotten to the rest of the series yet. I did a writing workshop for the first Saturday of every month for 13 years, a really long time, where I would bring in prompts and people would write in response to the prompts, and we'd read a couple and then we'd go on to the next. So they never finished anything in the class, but they left with the beginnings of so many things. So I collected a lot of some of the best prompts, the ones that were the most popular, that generated the very interesting stories, and collected those in that I Remember booklet.
Now, you also have on your website a 6-step 90-day writing coaching program, as well as other digital programs. Can you tell us about those?
I would go and I'd speak around the country or teach, and people would say, "Well, it's really great that you have all these cool classes in Orlando, but it's not doing me any good." And I started thinking about that, and it's like, yeah, it's true. So that's why I've developed this video series, and I've got 2 of them. One is Finish My Book in 90 Days, which you really don't have to finish your book in 90 days. The goal was to get to a first draft in 90 days, and I've had many people that have accomplished that goal. I mean, I have people that have written 80, 90,000 words in 90 days. Amazing, but that was a little overwhelming for most people, so I took that 90-day program and broke it into, I think there's 6 or 7 other programs that, like writing detail and description, getting started, how to get started, writing about people and places, punctuation, style, grammar. So I broke them into smaller segments, and those are a little more digestible, I think, for people than the 90-day sprint. And the other one is Edit Like an Expert. So it's for people who edit for a living, who want to edit for a living, people who are writing and want to be better writers. So it helps people just to learn about editing, what all it involves, and how to develop an editing process for themselves.
And you also coach people using the internet. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of it's done that way. I do meet with clients face to face if they're in Orlando, or like this gentleman flew down from Michigan to work with me this weekend. So I will do that, but I use different video conference programs, and then we can get face to face. And I usually try to meet with clients once a month and just kind of take stock of where they are and see what they need help with. And also, yeah, it really doesn't matter where you live anymore with technology. We can be right facing each other on the screen in a matter of a few clicks.
We're kind of wrapping up now, Patricia, and I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give someone who's been considering recording their life story in a book, but they haven't started?
Well, the first thing is something I mentioned before, is to know that they can't do it wrong. To give themselves permission to write the way that they write, and not try to hold themselves to some standard that's not realistic. It's just kind of in their own minds. And then I think the next piece of advice I'd give people is to start small because it is a daunting task when you're looking at writing an entire life. So focus on one memory and write just that one memory. Don't think about the rest of your life. Don't think also about writing in chronological order. I think that's the kiss of death to a project when people try to start at the beginning and write their way through. You just write what's on your heart. You can organize it later. You don't have to write in chronological order and to do something with what they've started with. So maybe write a story of an early memory, and it can be a paragraph long, it could be a page long, it can be 20 pages long, whatever it is to tell that story, and then to share it with someone. To share it with the people that love them, the people that it would mean a lot to, is share it, get the experience of what it is like to share. And I think that'll motivate him. This one client I had, he was so funny. He would write these stories and then he'd send them out to his brothers and sisters, and then they'd all write him back and they loved the story, but it was kind of like, that's not how that happened, and this happened that way, and so wasn't there for that, and da da da. And I just loved his response. He was like, "This is my story. Go write your own damn story," you know. And I just loved it. And it's true. It's your story, your memory. That's why they call it a memoir. So write something small and share it with someone who it would mean a lot to. And I think that the encouragement will come.
I think that's great advice. I love the story about your client. That's funny. So tell me, Patricia, where your business is located and what geographical locations do you cover?
I cover pretty much everywhere, but I'm based in Orlando, and the live courses that I teach are based out of Orlando. The video courses that I do, those include face-to-face time as well. The video courses will include group coaching and also one-on-one coaching as well.
So tell us how the audience can connect with you after the show.
Okay, my main website is writingyourlife.org, and it's got pretty much most of my information on there. The website is getting ready to be overhauled. If anyone is interested in the video course on the different getting started in writing people and places, finish my book in 90 days, they can go to finishmybookin90days.com. And if they're interested in the editing piece, it's called editlikeanexpert.com.
Fantastic, Patricia. Thank you so much for being on Storical today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. And anytime anybody gives me an opportunity to try to get the word out and just encourage one more person to write their story, I'm all over it. So thank you very much for giving me a soapbox.
Thank you for joining me in another episode of Storical. Feel free to let me know how you like Storical, either on iTunes or where you get your podcasts. Or you can email me, Peter, P-E-T-A, at Storical, STORYICAL.com. Come to our website at lifestoryprofessionals.com to get more information about the episode you heard today. The website has free downloadable tips and links and books that people on our show have written. May Storical inspire you to story the historical, because it's never too soon to get started, but often it can be too late.